Welcome to the podcast, Susan. It is so wonderful to meet you. Thank you for joining us here.
Well, when I ran across your profile, Katherine, I thought, what a marvelous person to have a conversation with, since you and I do almost, not quite, the same thing. And how nice to have a conversation so that we can talk about voice from where we both come from.
That's it. How exciting is that? And so maybe we should begin with letting the listeners know a little bit about who you are and what you do then.
Well, I've been in the broadcast industry for a very long time. I did my first commercial when I was 14, and I sort of did it accidentally. And then when I realized that, oh, good glory, they were going to pay me to talk, I thought, this is something I need to get in on. So I became a communications major and I wanted to get into television, and I did that. And I've been in radio and television in New York and West Palm Beach, Florida. A lot of my work was done in New York for public television. I am a voice actor. I do mostly narration, occasionally commercial. And then I moved to North Carolina a couple of years ago and was flipping around the TV dials, watching some local news. And I would see these young people who looked great on television. They could masterfully shoot stories. Their interviews were terrific. But the voices in which they narrated or, packaged their stories just didn't match the rest of the beauty that they would put into their work. And I thought, I know what the problem is. They don't teach voice in school anymore. And when I was coming up through school, if you wanted to be in television, you always started in radio because that's what you did. And there you got some voice coaching. Doesn't happen now. So I contacted a news director friend of mine and I said, hey, I would like to start coaching young people in how to be more effective communicators with easier to listen to voices. And he thought that was a great idea. And he sent me two of his reporters, and he didn't pay me, but he wrote me a recommendation. And I sort of hung out my shingle on LinkedIn. And lo and behold, almost 2 years later, the company is, I call it VOSAT, Better Broadcast Voices. VOSAT is broadcast shorthand for voiceover, sound on tape. And I work a lot with meteorologists, reporters, anchors, but I've branched out too. I have worked with CFOs and ministers and nurses, anybody who is looking to make a richer, more authentic voice. And I have found this to be truly, Katherine, my calling. I love doing it. I love working with people. I love to see the light bulb go on and then the confidence bloom. So that's how I got to become a broadcast voice coach. To my knowledge, there are very few of us out there who do what I do. You do to some degree. You could work with broadcasters, but there really aren't a lot of us, and I primarily work with them.
Yeah, in fact, I have worked with broadcasters in the past, and you're right. There is not a lot of us who do what we do. It is very specialized and very niche. What's interesting, which I did not know about you, and I'm not sure if you know about me, I am a voiceover artist as well.
Right. Of course. I do know that about you. You have some wonderful clients, and I love how you do animation. That's one of those things I wish I could do. I don't have many characters inside me as you do inside you.
It's funny when you become an actor or you have this look. Performing is my creative outlet, right? And it's come by way of voice, and in finding my voice, that evolved in a history of loving to perform and loving to perform on stage. But when I moved to Hollywood, I was really confronted by the fact that it became less about talent and more about who what agency you're represented by, the business side of things. And that wasn't the reason why I started performing in the first place. It was because that was my creative outlet, my expression. And then I found voiceover and I thought, oh my gosh, this is so cool, where people are looking for the talent more than all the other things that are involved in being an actor or a
Mhm.
performer as a business. So I immediately fell in love with that. And I realized that our voice is like a musical instrument or like a blank canvas. You can create anything you want with your voice, and you can mold and shape it to whatever you want it to be. And I thought,
Mhm.
my goodness, how exciting is that to create the love that I have for being another character, being outside
Mhm.
of my skin and being in somebody else's skin, and doing all of that through my voice.
Right. It
Yeah, special.
it's always fun to audition. I love to get the opportunity to do it. I don't book a whole lot of those things. I'm more of a narration kind of girl. Although I did for a while, about 25 years ago, I was into the public television station where I worked, where I was their promo voice and continued to be their promo voice, even here in North Carolina. And they needed a series of little promos done for these shows that were called Visions of Greece, Visions of Italy, Visions of France. And the promos had to be these breathy, sexy, exotic sort of reads. And my producer said, "Come on, Susan, you're here. Why don't you try it?" And I said, "Jen, no, this is not what I do." "Oh, come on, you're here. Please try it." Well, she forced me into it. And don't you know, when you're in that little voice booth and it's just you and the copy, inside of 20 minutes, I found what I call my inner Fifi. She existed. I didn't know she was there. And then I got to book all those spots. So, hey, lucky me. But you should never say never. You don't know sometimes the depths of your creativity until you try it. And
So
that's the nice thing about voice, is you can always try.
it is so true. And interesting on that is that when you start to doubt yourself in those moments, people pick up on that. They hear that, right?
Yes, they do.
Especially when you're working in front of a microphone, or even if you're not working in front of a microphone, but a microphone picks it up and amplifies it, right? So
Right.
whatever's going on inside the head, if there's any sort of self-doubt, it's incredible how it resonates on the other end.
And that's a big problem with reporters. In journalism classes and broadcast classes, they're taught all the technology and they are taught somewhat how to write, but they need a whole lot more practice than that. But there's no effort given at all as to how to deliver a news story, a feature story, or breaking news. I don't care what it is. And they think it's just getting up there and standing there with a microphone in front of them, where it really is way more complicated than that. And when I show them certain aspects of breathing and certain things that they can have mentally be picturing when they are doing what they're doing, when we talk about nuance, when we talk about making sure their writing reflects the emotion of the story, their eyes get wide and they're so surprised that there are so many layers to what goes into a good TV reporter's voiceover. And but when they kind of get that rhythm, that's when they start to really find themselves. That's when not only the stories become more interesting, mostly to the viewer, they become a little larger than life, which is what TV reporters have to be. They're supposed to be experts on the stories they're covering, and they're an expert on a different thing every day, which is hard when you're in those first 5 and 8 years and you're barely out of school and you have to dissect a bill that just went through the state house and what it means to the lawmakers as well as your viewers. And that's hard for them. So there's a lot of layers and nuance that when I get the client who isn't, maybe broadcast 101, but she's up at 201 or 301, we talk about the nuance in the delivery and how, yeah, it might not make a huge difference to you or the viewer, but overall it does make a difference. And news directors, I mean, for you to get your next job, news directors hear it all the time. They're looking for that nuance in voice. One of the things I use, one of the tips I give my reporters is what we voice actors call ABCing a line, where they can take some of their copy, keep recording, record all of them, do it 3 or 4 times with a breath between, with a different thought, with a different mindset, and see which one works. And so ABCing the line for them can be eye-opening, because then they get to hear. Most of us only hear our voices when we call attention to it. But if you really listen, the voice is capable of so much range. And that's what I try to show them, range.
Range. And it is so nuanced. It doesn't have to be these big movements. It can be quite small. I love that. It's so interesting how very similar the way we teach is, both revolved around the foundations of voiceover. I truly believe, for me, and now in teaching others, but voiceover made me a better actor. It made me a better communicator. It made me a better on-screen presenter. It made me a better keynote speaker. It made me a better showing up as a personal brand. It made me a better podcaster. Voiceover has transformed my career in so many ways. And it's just beautiful to find that somebody else out there is teaching the same principles to those that enter your world.
And one of the reasons it changes our lives is that we realize, because commercials are short, TV reports are short, even narrations, even a half-hour narration isn't really 30 minutes. It's, 20 minutes of voice or whatever. When you realize that you have a time parameter around what you're saying and how you say it, you become hyper aware of how to do it best. Whereas in just normal conversation, when we just go about our lives and talk a mile a minute and breathe shallowly and pitches are all over the place and we don't think about it, but because our work requires a time limit, we are super aware of making sure every syllable you say is said well. And that's something that we can all learn to use, not only if you're in a professional sense, whether you're on the air or on stage or presenting in front of a boardroom, but how about in your personal life? I talk about relationship to a spouse or to your children. There are ways that our voices can do so much good work when we put in the work. And part of that work is being mindful. It is listening probably harder than we're speaking, or listening more than we're speaking. And these are the things that we do all the time. And if more people took the time to learn just those little tips and tricks, I think the world would be kinder.
Absolutely. I think we do hold a lot inward, don't we? Perhaps for fear of judgment or fear what other people might say or think or do. So we hold in instead of expressing how we truly feel or what we truly want to say.
And what I try to teach my reporters is authenticity, because that's what it's all about now in TV news. TV news has taken a big turn, and it's not finished yet, in the last, say, 10 to 12 years. And I could go on about why, but you could probably figure out why. There are lots of reasons. The internet being right at the top of the list, uncivility being right below the internet. But the only reason you would turn on a newscast anymore, whereas before the internet, that's really the only way you got your news. The only reason you would turn on a newscast now is because you like and trust the people who are telling you what's going on in the world. So it's all about authenticity. It's all about transparency. It's all about edifying, simplifying, magnifying, amplifying news or features or whatever it is the reporter is doing. And 25 years ago, we could all be, the Ted Baxters or the Ron Burgundys, and those characters existed. I mean, they were real. Women, not so much, but yeah, to a degree, there were women who had an inauthentic, fake persona on air, and you still see them on occasion. But if television is going to survive into the next decade, it's going to be with authenticity. And that starts with the voice. It starts with an authentic voice that rises from the bottom of your diaphragm, and learning how to breathe and accessing that pitch. Most of us just don't do. We stopped doing that at about the time we all learned to walk. Babies naturally do it. And we breathe properly when we sleep. But when we're awake, most of us do not breathe properly. So I teach the breath work, and, any sort of rhythmic breath work like yogic breathing activates the parasympathetic nervous system and calms you down, and it prevents chemicals and hormones from being released in your body that work against you when you're on the air. So there's just so much one can learn. And these poor young people don't have any clue by the time they come out, and they're thrown into the real world. And it's a lot harder to be a reporter now than it was back in my day, because so many of them don't have camera people. So they do all the shooting, they do the editing. Some of them never even see the inside of the TV station. They can do it all from home now, which blows my mind. But it's not in every market or every station, but sure, a lot of that is done. So it's very different than it used to be. But if it can't be authentic, if it can't be transparent, if it can't be really truthful, it's not going to survive, at least not in commercial television, I don't think.
Interesting. It's amazing how in all these different industries, the key word that we're all hearing is authenticity.
Absolutely.
And it's through that authenticity, and through that authenticity is relatability of feeling like they're in the room with you. You're having a conversation. They're your people.
Right? And on days where there is not a lot of breaking or sad or dire news, they really do want to feel as though you've invited them into your living room, and they just want to be your friends. But then when it hits the fan, not only do you want your morning show people to be friendly and approachable and likable, but you want them to be strong when it comes to it. Severe weather or breaking news, that kind of thing. So anchors and reporters have to walk that line on the days when it's not breaking, to be sunny and bright and your friend. And then in a heartbeat, it can turn, and then they have to become super serious and truly believable in what they're needing to tell you in terms of breaking news. So it's two sides of one coin, and it can be a little like watching a tennis match some days, but yeah.
So I have a question, because when I think about broadcasters, reporters, and they're telling the news, I always think of it from a very, I don't want to say non-emotional way, but like they're not imposing their point of view. And so how then do you bring that authentic personal element to it without them feeling like they're leaning to one side or another? Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes perfect sense. And boy, that's been a question in the last 5 or 6 or 8 years that has certainly come up because of disinformation, misinformation on certain channels, how news is reported, how video is edited, what words you choose in writing a hot button story, either on reproductive health or arms control, whatever, school shootings, whatever. That we used to say we always had to be objective. And now the tide has turned, and it's not that we need to be objective, because sometimes in covering the Trump administration, news departments everywhere, I think, except Fox, wrestled with all right, this is the president of the United States, and he is saying X, Y, and Z. Well, we've done the research, and Y and Z aren't true. So fact checking the president, and where you have to call out the president of the United States for not being truthful, that kind of, everybody just, should we just report what he says and let everybody else try to figure it out? Or are we obligated to give context? Are we obligated to put things in perspective? Are we obligated to fact check? So this has been, and even with the Biden administration, now fact checking has become a kind of standard thing. Some stations do, and I forget which group of stations, it's called Verify, and they will do a little piece on, okay, in the State of the Union address last night, we heard XYZ ABC, and they would go through and they would tell you what was technically true, what was sort of true, and what was out and out false. So a lot of us in the news business are trying very hard to make sure that what we're reporting and how we're reporting it is as transparent and as clear as possible. And of course, once we hit, CNN came on the air in the 90s and you had 24-hour news, we all had to learn that sometimes the information you get at the beginning of a story isn't true, and you end up having to change it or update it later, and to have to say that you had gotten some bad information. So that's another problem that we didn't have prior to the internet or 24/7 news coverage. So that's, and again, your voice has to be right there front and center in telling you what's going on, and in the most truthful way you can do it. And truthful isn't always objective.
Mm.
There you go.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I've got a tough job.
There are days. Yes. Yes. And of course, we've always been known as gatekeepers of news. Like, okay, we'll go cover that legislative hearing because you can't go sit there all day, but I can sit there all day. And then it's my job to, in less than 2 minutes, sum up what happened in that legislative meeting that went 3.5 hours. So you're trusting us to take the important pieces and then bring them to you. That's a big responsibility, to take a 3-hour meeting and figure out what's the most important thing. And then, of course, COVID hit, and schools and masks and vaccine mandates and all of that made school board meetings very interesting. Whereas 4 years ago, a school board meeting was a snore. Not lately, it hasn't been. I mean, parents are really, now they're talking about books that they don't want their kids to read, and sexual health that they don't want discussed. And it's a free for all now, and it didn't used to be. Things were so much more easily ordered. That order has melted away. So it's tough being a reporter now. It really is.
One of the other things when I think about reporters and broadcasters is, and I think you touched upon this earlier, about being an expert, that they have to be an expert at so many things, which is very interesting because, gosh, that's such a similarity to voiceover, isn't it? Where, and also the time frame too, where you get information, technical words and jargon that you've never heard, and you don't even know what it is, and how quickly you have to sound like an expert. Wow. Aren't they lucky to have you? So how do you find, what's your process for then training them to be able to do that on the fly like we do in voiceover?
Mm-hmm. It's not unlike voiceover, where we have to answer the question, who are we talking to? What problem are we solving? Who's in the room? What does the room look like? Well, when a reporter goes to cover a school board meeting, what are they doing? They are looking around the room. They're listening. They are finding out the important issues in that meeting. They are who am I talking to is the audience. Reporters always have to remember that they don't work for the news director. They don't work for the station. In my opinion, you work for me, the viewer.
Yeah.
And your job is to tell me in terms that I am easily going to understand in less than 2 minutes. That's why you have to become the expert. You have to peel away all the unnecessary stuff and just bring me the necessary things. So what I will often say to them is, all right, when you get that lawmaker or that doctor or that scientist, one of the things I will say is, they will pontificate until the cows come home. So let them pontificate, because even you're confused at this point. And I'll always say, well, Dr. Smith, if you had to explain this concept, this drug, this whatever disease to a group of 6th graders, how would you do that? And then get that answer. A, it will clarify it for you, but B, it will put it into terms that your audience can more easily understand. Wasn't it Einstein who said that if you can't explain something simply, you don't understand it? So same with voice actors, whether it's a car commercial or a narration for an ecological site, no matter what it is, yes, you need to soak it in like a sponge so that you can sound like the expert.
Mm.
You're a storyteller who knows how the story ends. So you have to bring that to your listeners, all while being professional, while making sure you have the right kind of audio, rather video. It's a lot on their plate, and they work all day for the glory of being on television for less than 2 minutes.
Wow.
It's
Incredible.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
It sounds very similar as well if you ever work with online business owners where they are an expert in what they do as well. And oftentimes when they communicate, or they might be pitching or selling, if they start speaking into technical terms, expecting their audience to understand, oftentimes we need to shift the messaging so that it's, more of that, like you said, 6th grader level that makes sense for the listener, because
Mm-hmm.
they oftentimes are coming from the knowledge and the expertise and forgetting that it's about the audience and making sure that their audience is with them on that journey, not expecting them to know what they're talking about.
And I think for those kinds of CEOs and business owners, it's hard for them to distill that message for the, lack of a better phrase, the average person, because I think their whole lives they get to hide behind the technology, the medicine, the science, the whatever. And so for them to have to translate it means stepping into an entirely new arena that they're just not comfortable with, but it makes all the difference in what you're trying to accomplish. You can't have people in the audience whose eyes glaze over or go at a mile a minute using terms where if they were to finish what they were doing and you were to turn to me and say, okay, Susan, what did they say? And I'd go, I have no idea. If you can't spit some of it back, you haven't succeeded.
Yeah. And that's
working with your audience.
Between being in your head and really being connected with your audience and making it about them, right?
Exactly. You have to make it about them. They're your donors. They pay your salary. They buy your product. They tune into your TV channel. Yes, of course, it has to be all about me and not you. And that's hard for some people. But again, when you get into that mindset and you get feedback, when reporters, and that's another thing that reporters have to now put up with, is they all have to have Facebook pages. They all have Gmails and Twitter accounts and Instagram. So they get the trolls, they get the people who compliment them too, but more often they get really nasty comments about what they were wearing or how they looked or how their voice sounds. which is why some news directors call me to work with people, because they hear from the audience where that never used to happen. That wasn't a thing. So there's no barrier, or there's a much thinner barrier now between reporters and anchors and the public, because you can find them anywhere and leave a message anonymously. It's stalking many times, and that's frightening. And that, I think, holds people back too. The
Right.
fear of that.
Yeah. And gosh, that's in so many different professions as well, where it really, many of us, are personal brands, from the reporter to the voiceover to the online business owner to the, product-based owner. And how do we, knowing that in order to thrive, we really do need to put ourselves out there in a multitude of different platforms and ways. How do we, deal with some of the negativity that comes our way?
Yep.
Some of us struggle with that, don't they? Like, I'm
yes,
sure
they do.
And does that start to affect how they use their voice and show up when they're using their voice and broadcasting?
Interesting question. Yes and no. I think sometimes it can spur them to, if they really think it was honest criticism just said in a nasty way, they might take something from that and realize, okay, maybe I can change this or try something else. But I do think when it becomes overwhelming, that you're right. I think the reporters and anchors shut down a little bit, and they become a little more flat, so that they don't invite that kind of criticism, at least about your voice. If you go on air and there you are with whatever hair color or makeup, I mean, they can still rip you for that. But you're right. I think it can inhibit how a reporter might go about her work if she knows I worked with a meteorologist out in the Midwest, and she did have a high, sort of scratchy, breathy, sometimes unpleasant voice to listen to. And she breathed in sort of some odd spots. And her news director got emails that said, "Oh, I hate the sound of your voice, and you mispronounced the word Arkansas." And I mean, and that became weekly, if not more, for her. So when I started to work with her, I was already working with a wounded, defensive on-air person who was just tired of having other meteorologists trying to tell her what to do, a news director telling her what to do. And then here I come, and I'm a voice coach, and oh, good, somebody else to tell me what to do. But I gave her some strategies that did improve mostly the pitch of her voice and the pacing. And she actually started to get some compliments on her Facebook page. And that to me was like, okay, yay, I'm done here. My work is finished. Not quite, but it was so life-giving to her. And I was glad to see that. Just had to work through some challenges. And women often have challenges with their voices because of what happened when they were children. Authoritative parents that shut you down. Dysfunctional families where the screaming or in some families, the silence was deafening, so that you adapted a voice and a persona and a way of just living and getting through it. Or I think even sometimes getting into your teenage years, attracting a partner and changing your voice to hopefully have other people perceive you as sexy or whatever it is you're trying to come across as. And that by the time you're 23 and now you're on the air and you're a reporter, there are times that voice, you always have to let that voice go. For some women, it's really hard to do until we talk about what happened growing up. Was it overbearing brothers and sisters? Did an art teacher tell you that, what you created was horrible, and so therefore you thought you could never create anything, including a news report? So learning to step into authenticity, because those voices that you adapted and adopted when you were younger aren't the real you. Let me show you where the real you is. She's in there. Let me help you bring her out. Let's make some space here. Let's give yourself permission to find the voice that's been at the bottom of your diaphragm forever. You just hadn't used it yet because it didn't serve you well. If you did speak loudly, or if you did have a lower than normal voice, that worked against you too. So for women, finding and being able to access that authentic pitch all the time can be a challenge, but it is so rewarding.
Yeah, that's it. I like to think of it kind of like Pandora's box. It's been buried deep down inside. And then all of a sudden, one day, the box opens up and all of these feelings and thoughts and ways you always wanted to communicate are now able to be set free out into the world.
And that has to be good. It has to be good. I don't care whether it was fear or anger or resentment. I don't care what you are sending out into the world. But what's the expression? If you're not sharing, you're holding on to something. Don't hold on to that, whatever it was that's, as you said, so deep inside, buried in this box. Let it out, because there's beauty underneath that. And I've just been amazed that probably easily 15% of the women I work with need my help in letting them be who they're naturally supposed to be. And that's what a joy to be able to do that. Yeah.
It is great. And we were talking about that. I can't remember if it was before we started recording or after, about, that being your greater purpose. And as it is for me, is this beautiful way of serving others in helping them find their voice, and to be understanding that it's okay to say what you want to say.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And it's amazing to me that so many people need the help, but how glad I am that there are people in the world like you, like me, who do this, who can just help people step into more authenticity. And that's, as we said, a life's purpose. And it's a joy to be able to do that. And some of my clients, students, when I taught at the university level 20 years ago, I still have some of those students in my life, because voice is very intimate. So when we're talking about that, you become, you get into some things, girl, and so you bond, because it's intimate how you use your voice and when you use it. So, and that's an upside to what we do as well.
It is. Oh, well, gosh, you put a smile on my face. That's for sure.
And mine too. It's so nice to talk with somebody else who gets the same joy and the same feels from helping people finding their voice. And, it doesn't take forever. And the breath practice that I give you is, if you do it faithfully for 3 weeks, you don't have to practice it anymore. It becomes muscle memory. So it's not hard. And sometimes it just takes somebody to walk with you on that journey.
Yeah.
That's what it is. It's a journey.
It is. And to know that you're not alone, that there are others walking that journey right alongside you.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So fun. I am, I'm delighted to, hear that your business is going well, and, personal branding is what we all need and are. And when you realize you are your own personal brand, again, that gives you confidence. It gives you a place to speak your truth from, because you've recognized that you're not just melting into the crowd. Oh no, this is me. It's who I am. And when you build on that authenticity, it makes you a better person. It really does. Not a better salesperson, not a better reporter. It makes you a better person.
Yeah. That's why I named the podcast The Voice of Your Brand, because oftentimes as personal brands, we think we are the face, but we're also the voice, as you know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. As I like to say, if your eyes are the windows to your soul, your voice and is your front door.
Yes. Yeah, it's so true. I was actually just doing a voiceover session yesterday, and it's incredible to me that ads are now as short as 6 seconds. 6 seconds,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Yeah.
for the personal brand, what that means is that we have just a handful of seconds to, for them to decide whether they want to connect to you or move on to the next. And that's a very powerful thing to know, that those first few seconds is where people, even in the broadcasting, it doesn't matter how you're showing up, are making a decision about you.
Yep.
Good, bad, or ugly, they're making a decision. And it
Mm-hmm.
really is in your power to decide what that decision is. But it starts with that awareness.
And when we make those choices consciously and mindfully, chances are we're going to make the right choices. And that will make life a whole lot easier too. So again, the breath, I talk a lot to reporters about using a pause for several reasons. A pause allows the reporter to take another breath and for their brain to go a couple of seconds ahead into what they're going to say. But really, the pause is for the viewer, because you have just told me something. Wait, I need a minute, not a minute. I get a half a second for it to land. I need to absorb. And sometimes a second or a second and a half is all you need to absorb it. Because if you just go without stopping, I'm absorbing nothing. And in 6 seconds, given what you do, Katherine, 6 seconds, you have to absorb it. So,
it's incredible. But as you said, that's the pause, again, brings it back to, it's about them. It's about the audience. It's not about you. It's about the audience.
That's exactly right. And when you think about the audience as opposed to yourself, it can be easier. When you think about you have a laundry list. When you think about the audience, it's like, oh, okay, well, these are just people who need to know what about this story that's important. I know that most of my viewers are over the age of 60. I know some people are not watching TV, but it's just on in the kitchen while they cook. It's so much easier to just think about the other person and stop thinking about you. Stop it.
I love it.
Yeah.
Oh, Susan, it's been so wonderful talking to you and getting to know what you do and the amazing similarities between how both of us work. And if there's anyone out there that's listening and wants to get in touch with you, how do they find you?
Well, I'm certainly on LinkedIn. There are a lot of Susan Murphys, so just look at Susan Murphy Voice Coach and I should come right up. But my website is Susan Murphy Vosot, VOSOT.com, SusanMurphyVosot.com.
And we will link that up in the show notes. Thank you so much, Susan.
Thank you, Katherine. What a joy.
What a joy. I love it. It's so nice to be in your world now and to get to know you. And
yes. I suspect.
Definitely keep in touch.
Right. Our paths should cross. I don't know why or how, but there's probably, I hate that word synergy, but I'll use it. There's probably synergy here that somewhere, somehow, some project is going to require the two of us. And won't that be fun?
Let's put it out there.
Let's. Yes. Right. Speak our truths.
Speak our truths. Love it. Thanks so much, Susan. Have a great day.
Thank you, Katherine. What a lovely conversation.